Well, hello there, California. It is 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's a wonderful day. And we are back at the California Secessionist live feed for episode 4, where we're going to be going in and talking about some national divorce issues once again. And we're going to do a slightly different format this time around because we're going to be addressing a video made by a relatively well-known TV personality who has taken a position on national divorce. And to be honest, I haven't watched the video yet, but I do know that the position, as I understand, based on some of the context around it, is that this particular personality is somewhat not in favor of national divorce. But I haven't watched it, but I don't need to watch it. Well, I didn't need to watch it to prepare for this live stream anyway, because I know what he's going to say. Because all of the people who are opposed to national divorce have the same talking points, and they just kind of parrot each other. There's nothing really unique. There's not any really solid arguments. And so I thought it would be fun, at least for me, maybe not for you, but it will be fun for me to go through this video. It's by Glenn Beck, who has now taken a position in the national conversation about national divorce. And I haven't watched the video, but we're going to watch it now. And I'm going to be commenting on his talking points and his points that he tries to make in his video as I hear it for the first time. So we're going to have some unfiltered and, initial responses that I have as I watch this video. And he's going to say some things that I can predict because they all say the same things. Let's hope that I'm wrong, because it'd be interesting to hear a new argument about why national divorce is not a good idea, why Calexit is not a good idea, why Texit or New Hampshire independence is not a good idea. I'd be interested to hear the arguments because I haven't heard any good arguments. And the only thing that I really ever hear about why we can't have national divorce is never anything about why we should stay together because the union is so great, or why the federal government functions so well, and that's why we should stay together as a country, or that our society is so peaceful towards one another. We have tranquility in society. We don't have any of those arguments. Nobody can make an argument with a straight face that says, well, we can't have national divorce. Why would we want that? Because the country works so well, and because the union is so strong, and the State of the Union is so great. I mean, the presidents may say that every year at the State of the Union address. They go up there at the Congress and they say, ladies and gentlemen, the state of our union is strong. Yeah, well, it's just a bunch of words, and nobody believes that. And so I'm still challenging someone out there who doesn't like the idea of national divorce. Someone like Glenn Beck, for example, to go out there and give us an example that says, this is my argument against national divorce. 1, the union is strong. 2, the federal government functions and serves the people of the country effectively and efficiently. 3, the people of the country have common visions and common goals and values that we share still to this day. And 4, it would be in our best interest to stay together as a country. Because I don't see those arguments. What I see, and what I predict that I'm going to hear again from Glenn Beck, is, we can't have national divorce because, it would be hard to draw the line somewhere. Or we can't have national divorce because China and Russia will benefit from that. Or we can't have national divorce because we're Americans and we're better than that because we're Americans and we're the number 1 country in the world. And we've won every war and we've sent a man to the moon. And therefore, we're so great because we're just Americans that we're better than that. We're not going to have a division of our country like they do in other countries or other continents around the world for all of human history. Every empire in the world has risen and fallen, but we're too good for that because we're Americans. And so therefore we're above that. We're not going to ever fall. We're going to break that trend that empires rise and fall. And we're going to be the only empire in human history that's ever lasted forever. That's what I'm expecting that we're going to hear either from Glenn Beck or from a future opponent of national divorce. But without further ado, let us get into Mr. Glenn Beck's position on national divorce, because honestly, like I said, I haven't heard it. So let's go through it and let's see what he has to say.
Whether you realize it or not, you, me, all of us are already living in a revolutionary time. It is happening in our country and all over the world. But here in America, there is no Mason-Dixon line this time. The two sides are split ideologically. There are those that want to fundamentally change this country. And then there are those that believe the United States of America and its founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, should be upheld as the founders intended. And we can't agree on anything. There are two genders. Dare not say that.
Maybe he's
the
going to come out
left
in
fights
support of
people that
national
say there are
divorce. Maybe I was
99
wrong.
genders. The trans bathrooms, is that okay? Is that not? How about the boys that are becoming girls? Can they compete against your girls? And is that good for your girls? Chemical castration of our children without any kind of parental input. How about the fact that whites are all racists and MLK was wrong and looting and burning is okay as long as it's for BLM? Those who cross our borders, they definitely need no vaccine. They're fine, but you definitely must have one or you're fired.
Okay, well, I want to pause for a minute there because actually he said something interesting there that affects me personally, and I want to have my own little personal addition to that little point there. So far, I agree with Mr. Beck. So far, seems like he's laying out a good foundation for an argument in support of national divorce. Not opposed to one, but in support of one. But let's see what he says further. But before we do that, I want to really address what he just said there because it's really a personal issue for me. We have a countless number of people, for one reason or another, some of them justified, some of them maybe not justified, illegally crossing the border in the United States. We don't even know how many there are. And they're not required to wear masks. They're not required to come be vaccinated. They're not required to come in with a negative coronavirus test. They're just allowed to come in because they're seeking asylum or something to that effect. So, and that's great. So a country has a responsibility to accept people for asylum. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to providing asylum to those who need it. But the fact of the matter is that these people are crossing the border illegally. They do not have to wear masks. They do not have to be vaccinated. They do not have to come in with a negative coronavirus test. And yet, when I return to the United States, I will have to present as a citizen a negative COVID test. When my wife comes to the United States as an immigrant next year, she will have to be vaccinated when she comes through the legal process of immigration. She will have to be vaccinated. And anybody else who comes to the United States legally will come to the United States on an airplane where they'll be wearing a mask, and they can only get on the airplane if they have proof of that they've been vaccinated, or if they're citizens that they've at least have a negative COVID test. And so I think that's pretty ridiculous that we're allowing people to enter the country through the southern border who are not wearing masks. If we want to accept the fact that the masks are effective or not, that's another debate. But the point of the matter is some people believe that the masks are effective. So therefore, let's let these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people into the country to the southern border with no masks, no vaccine, no negative COVID test. And that's okay. And yet I need to show a COVID test as a citizen when I come back to my own country. My wife will have to have a vaccine to show that she's been vaccinated. Although that doesn't mean that she can't carry coronavirus into the country. She can't be a carrier. It doesn't mean that she's going to be protected from being a carrier. It doesn't mean that she's going to be prevented from being able to spread coronavirus if she is a carrier to other people because she's vaccinated. But it is what it is. She'll have to be vaccinated. And so I don't like the double standard. Let's see what else Mr. Beck has to say. So far, I seem to be pretty much in agreement with him, and he's setting up a good argument in support of national divorce.
How do we bridge the gap? This is the revolution of our time. I believe, and I hope this is wrong, but I believe the left wants this to turn violent. They have been itching for a fight. They want the chaos. Can you name?
Okay, now here I have to part ways with Mr. Beck. I do not believe that the vast majority of Americans, although we have such significant differences, diametrically opposed worldviews, and we really are at each other's throats, I really don't think that there's a desire, an intention for things to continue to get worse. I just think that there's an impossibility of finding compromise without compromising each other's values. And that's why we can't find compromise, because we shouldn't have to live in a country where in order for there to be tranquility in society, one side or the other has to compromise their values. It's okay to compromise. And I'm supportive of compromise. I think that we should compromise when it comes to policy preferences, policy details. What tax percentage are we going to have for corporate tax rate? What tax percentage are we going to have for the income tax? If we're going to have an income tax, we can have compromise on those issues without compromising our values. And so the problems that we have in our society today, which is why I support national divorce, is because in order for us to find that peace and tranquility in society, once again, one side or the other is going to have to, or perhaps both sides, going to have to compromise their values. And I don't believe that that's necessary. I don't believe that we should have to live in a country where I have to compromise my core values simply to have tranquility in society. And I don't believe that the people who disagree with me on fundamental issues of culture and morality ought to have to compromise their values to live in harmony with me. It's better for us to simply agree to disagree, that we have such different worldviews. And it makes no sense for us to sit down and try to work it out, because we're never gonna convince the other side to compromise or to agree on something. And so that's why we at National Divorce want to have the country come to terms with the point that we need to agree to disagree, split up the assets, share the debts, and then peacefully part ways. I do not believe that even the most extremist activist on the left and the most extremist activist on the right, that they want there to be violence in the streets. I don't think that anybody really wants that. Are there some people out there who want to commit crimes and acts of violence against others based on their political beliefs? Yes, those are criminals. But doesn't mean that the national divorce and that those millions of Americans, obviously, because we have great public opinion polls that are now demonstrating the fact that some pretty significant percentages of Americans are supportive of breaking up the union. So that represents millions and tens of millions of Americans who support the idea of national divorce, that those people want to have disorder and chaos in the streets and violence. I don't agree with Mr. Beck here. And I think that we can achieve national divorce without the chaos, without the violence. In fact, that's what this national divorce campaign is about. It is for us to be able to avoid going down that path that would eventually lead to political turmoil and perhaps even civil war. That's why we need to, before the powder cake explodes, that's why we need to have national divorce, to get out of each other's hair. Stop living under the same dysfunctional household. Stop forcing each other to live by a certain set of values. That's what this campaign is about. And by doing so, we can get out of each other's domestic affairs. The people of California can live as they see fit, as that we see fit. The people of Texas can live as they see fit in Texas, and we're not going to interfere with each other's domestic affairs. And by doing that, we can have peace and tranquility in North America. But let's continue on and see what else Mr. Beck has to say.
A leftist revolution that didn't result in violence and chaos. It's kind of their thing. Your job and mine is to make sure they don't get what they want. So where do we currently stand? And is it time for a national divorce? And if so, what does that mean?
It is time for a national divorce.
Tonight you'll be better prepared to answer those questions,
split up the assets,
because the time to draw a line in the sand was yesterday. And if we fail, then this grand experiment, this United States of America, could be lost forever.
Sometimes experiments fail. I'm sorry to tell you. Sometimes experiments
fail. For just
fail.
$67,
here we have
you can make as many videos as you want.
Mr.
And you never need to pick up a camera or use any fancy editing software.
Yeah, I think that
With Doodly, you drag.
Sometimes we need to accept the fact that sometimes experiments fail, and that's going to be the case for this American experiment, which has actually gone on for 250 years. It's had a good run. It's not like we're throwing in the towel and it's only been 10 years or 20 years.
Just like the one you're watching right now.
It's been
drag and drop
over 2 centuries, and so it's time for us to accept the reality that the experiment has failed. And so that's what this campaign national divorce is about. Let's see what else.
Hello, America. I want to be very clear about something. tonight's show is not about hoping for the breakup of this country. I can't think of anything more devastating. For my friends
Someone
watching over
told
at
him a
George
message in the
Soros'
ear
Media
during his
Matters,
commercial
if I
break
say the word fight tonight,
that
mean violence.
you know what,
I
Mr.
fear
Beck, it
this
sounds like
country
you're
is
supporting
now
and laying
so
out a
far
good argument in
divided
support
that
of
we may
national
never get
divorce.
back to the way
it used to be.
And
And when it
Back
comes
to
to
the
the
way it
economy
used
and
to
other
be.
things,
The
we
good old
already
days.
are hearing from the White House that we will never go back to the way it used to be.
We won't.
But there are peaceful solutions to this problem. I'm not sure they're going to work, but we have to be prepared. I'll provide some of these solutions with a couple of guests later on in the program. But first,
He's got some
we need to take
solutions
care
for
of
us.
something, and allow me for a second to hearken back to my alcoholism recovery days. The first stage of the fight, again, not meaning violence, is admitting you're powerless, admitting the truth. And that truth is you and I, we are living in a revolution right now.
So, I mean, I agree that the first step here, if we're going to go through these stages, would be to, yes, accept the truth, acceptance, I guess. But we're going to disagree on what we should accept. I think that we are in the midst of a revolution, a political revolution. I mean, Bernie Sanders was trying to lead a political revolution, a peaceful political revolution. And I think that it's time for that kind of activity in America, peaceful political revolution, like Bernie Sanders was leading back in 2016. That's a good thing because we need to have change in the United States. We need to have change in California. And we're not going to have change through gradual step-by-step movements, one step forward, two steps back, like we've been doing basically all of my life. So we need to have some drastic change. And I think the people have the right to that change because what we have now is not working. And we have one life to live. And why should we spend it trying to work and be activists and community organizers for all our lives so that we can make 1 inch of progress to make our lives better? I think we deserve more than an inch. I think that we can make a mile of progress through political revolution, peaceful political revolution. National divorce is an example of peaceful political revolution. So I think that we do need to accept the truth. The truth is that not so much that we're in the middle of a revolution like Mr. Beck here wants to focus on. The truth that we need to accept is that this society is living under a roof in the proverbial house that Lincoln spoke of, that's divided against itself along different lines that was divided in the 1800s that led up to the Civil War. And that house cannot stand divided against itself. And that California needs to move out of this dysfunctional household and have its own house where things are run under its roof as it sees fit. And that's what national divorce will do for California. It'll allow us to have the opportunity for the first time to say the equivalent of my house, my rules. And we can do what we want to do in California, what's best for the people of California. By putting the people of California first, we can have our house, our rules, our state, our rules, our country, our laws. And that's what national divorce will achieve for California. That's what national divorce will achieve for any state that goes through it and separates from the country. Let's go on with Mr. Beck and see what else he's got to say, what stage 2 is.
It is already here, but we're not powerless. Culturally, that revolution has been raging for years. The government is now pushing full steam ahead. I've been talking about these days for over a decade now, top down, bottom up, and inside out. But we have never seen a top down assault like what is happening right now. And I fear it's about to get worse.
It's so dramatic.
Much of that will be manifested in the left's $3.5 trillion spending package. How can they cut $1 trillion out of this and still say it's going to have the same fundamental impact on our country? That's what Nancy Pelosi said. Because it's not about spending. Yes, it has spending, free college and child tax credit systems that looks to me, like a pilot program for universal basic income. But the real purpose of this spending package is obvious. It is framework for what we will collapse into. It is an unprecedented growth of the federal government that will have the ability to reach directly into your living room, your bedroom, your place of business, your office, your car, everywhere. It will be present in every aspect of your life.
Every aspect
And
of your life.
by and large, the country knows this.
Yeah, you know, actually, I'm laughing here because he's being so dramatic. It's kind of funny. But I mean, to some extent, it's true. We have a problem when it comes to the size of government, the scope of government, the ability of government to interfere in our lives and our personal lives and our families and our homes and our medical decisions and our communications and our ability to travel and our ability to make decisions for ourselves and our ability to collect water and our ability to go hiking. We have government involved in every aspect of our life. And I definitely believe that's a huge problem. And that we need to have as part of this, peaceful political revolution that we have going on, where people are organizing for the next chapter of what's going to happen in North America, that we need, and the polls have shown that people are growingly, to a larger extent, supporting a reduction in the size and scope of government. We need to have smaller government. We need to have less government. We need to have more freedom to do what you want to do for you, and other people do what they want to do for themselves. And that we need to abide by the definition of freedom is that freedom is the ability to do what you want as long as you're not infringing on the right of others. And we don't have that in this country. We don't have it in California. We don't have it because everyone needs to be involved in everyone else's business all the time. And so we need, and that's why we have this problem with why we need national divorce, by the way, because we're interfering with each other's affairs, whether it be left versus right, left states or blue states versus the red states and conservative states, or even on an individual level. Someone's walking down the street and you don't like the way they're dressed, the way they look, or who they're holding hands with. We got to get involved in that. Somebody's got to say something. And so that's not freedom. If you can't live in your own society without having people treat you unfairly, without having the ability to blend into society without sticking out just because you're different, that's not freedom. And so what we need to have is smaller scope of government and a lesser reach of government. And when I'm running for California governor, one of the key things that I represent is that we as a state are going to start standing up not just for civil rights, but also for civil liberties, because I believe that those two are different and they're equally important. And we need a governor who's not going to just stand up for civil rights, but also for civil liberties. And in order to stand up for civil liberties, the first and most effective thing we can do is to reduce the size of government and reduce the scope of government. And so on this point, I may agree with Mr. Beck to some extent on the principle that we need to have less government involvement in our personal lives, and we need to have less government involvement in every aspect of our lives, and that we need to have more people stand up and be able to take responsibility for their own lives.
That's why they can't get this passed. But that's not stopping them. No. It's why they snuck it in under reconciliation. I want you to take a look at a tweet from Bernie Sanders, because it's a perfect example that we are in a revolution and we just think entirely differently.
Done in Washington, so
Quote,
they have to have these
2 senators cannot be allowed to
sneaky
defeat what
procedures
48
just to pass
senators and blah,
legislation.
blah, blah. Excuse me, 2 senators? No, it would be 52 senators that opposed a radical socialist wish list, not 2. They represent over half the country. But that's exactly how Bernie and the rest of them feel about you. You don't really matter. They know better, and they don't give a crap about what you think. That's why they feel like they can lie to you and say $3.5 trillion. And that doesn't actually cost anything. It's going to cost you your freedom. They are weaponizing every arm of the federal government to go after you now. The Department of Justice and the FBI. Do you trust them? They're now investigating you if you have the audacity to have an opinion at a local school board meeting about what they're teaching your kids in school. That's
a big problem we have going on. I was just talking about the size and scope of government interference in personal lives. And now we have the Biden administration mobilizing its Justice Department to go after parents who are expressing their opinions, aka speaking, at public school board meetings about what their children are learning in schools. Now, whether or not you agree with their position about what their kids should be learning or not is a different issue. They have the right to say it. They have the right to say it. They have the right to attend the school board meeting and express their concerns and to speak their minds. That's what the freedom of speech is all about. And yet now, in this great country we have, this great union that we should all keep together, we have the federal government mobilizing the Department of Justice to go after these parents who simply want to stand up and speak their minds about what's going on in their children's education. What happened to freedom of speech? The problem is that a lot of people on the left, extremists on the left, believe that we should curtail freedoms when they, interfere with their agenda, because they think that often their agenda is so enlightened that it's worth it to kind of curtail freedoms if the result is that they can achieve these grand ideals that they're pursuing as progressives. And so that they might need to silence angry parents at these school board meetings in order to achieve the higher objective of teaching children a particular curriculum. And so that's a problem. That's a problem you're not gonna find compromise there. These people who want to push this type of agenda and this curriculum on our schools, they're not going to back away from that. They're very strategically doing what they want to do, electing people to school boards that nobody really pays attention to. And when it comes to the elections, like we vote in the elections, and you can sometimes vote for the members of the school board, and most of the time you probably don't even know who it is. You're just voting for names. Maybe you like the guy's name, or you like the fact that it's an incumbent or not, or you like the fact that they're a businessman or a businesswoman. Most of the time, most Americans, when they're voting for president, senator, House of Representatives, you go down further down the ticket, they don't know who these people running for the school board are. But the people who are encouraging them to run do. And you can bet your bottom dollar that there's a coordinated effort to make sure that the people who make up school boards in this country and in California hold a particular opinion on what ought to be taught in the schools. And so that is, I think, a valid point to make. And I think, regardless of whatever the curriculum is, I stand up for civil liberties. Parents have the right to go to these meetings, or ought to have the right to go to these meetings, and speak their minds. And if they don't agree with it, they should be able to speak their minds in a way that represents their opinion on the matter. That's what the freedom of speech is all about. And we have a government right now, the United States federal government, mobilizing after these parents who are simply expressing their mind at public hearings. And, for 4 years of Donald Trump being president, all we heard all the time was how much of a fascist Donald Trump was. And now we literally have the federal government of the United States. Mobilizing the power of the police power of the government to go after people who simply are dissenting. What is that? What is that? You know what it is. I don't have to tell you what it is. Let's go on with Mr. Beck.
Government sidestepping us. They are just telling you, we'll take your kids from here. We got it. And all of this began because the government weaponized the Department of Education to push critical race theory in our schools, teaching our children that the color of their skin defines their character and that their country is systematically racist and broken. You think we're in a revolution?
America is kind of a racist
By the way,
country
for anybody who thinks, because your friends will probably tell you, oh, they're not teaching that in schools.
Many Americans are racist.
They are. Yes, they are. Did you see the documents that were released in Rhode Island this weekend? No. Did you see what Judicial Watch released? The actual documents from the schools? And it doesn't stop there. The federal government has no authority to mandate vaccines. States do. Federal government doesn't, but that's not stopping them. They're now weaponizing OSHA to do it for them. They're using the IRS to track anyone's bank account that has more than $600. I fill my truck.
Well, yeah, I mean, he brings up a point here about federalism, and that's one of the reasons why we need a national divorce, is because that federalist system that would, in theory, allow for the states to do a vaccine mandate if they wanted to, is no longer in place because now the federal government is taking that power for themselves. And through things like the necessary and proper clause, elastic clause, the commerce clause, they find creative interpretation of the laws that they write in order to give themselves the authority to do so, or they don't have the constitutional authority enumerated to them in the Constitution to do that. But through the idea that it's necessary and proper, or something to do with commerce, the federal government finds a way, as they find a way on anything that they want to, in order to give themselves the authority to interfere or find the jurisdiction to regulate somebody's life somewhere. And so it's because of that broken system that we live in, where we don't have a situation where federalism is being respected and used the way it was designed, is just another example of why we need a national divorce, because the country itself is not functioning the way it was designed to function. In the very beginning, I spoke about how, when's that article coming out where an opponent of national divorce is going to lay out the reasons why we should not have a national divorce? And among those reasons is going to be the simple fact that the country is working great, and the union is strong, and the federal government's functioning as it should, and it's serving the people, and the states are serving their people, and everything is hunky-dory. That article does not and will not exist unless it is categorized under satire. And that's why we need a national divorce, because the system, the country that we are living in, is broken. And how are we supposed to function and pursue happiness and have our rights protected when we're living in a system that's broken? And so therefore that system cannot protect our rights, because the primary function of government is to protect your rights. But if the government is broken and the system through which that government functions is broken, how can we rely on it to protect the rights of the people or protect us from exterior threat? The President of the United States, no matter who it is, always goes around talking about how, their most important responsibility is to protect the American people from the terrorists somewhere. Does that really work? I mean, we're not really protected from the terrorists somewhere, the abstract terrorists, whoever they want to call the terrorists of the day or the week. Every couple of years we have a new group of terrorists out there that we're supposed to be afraid of. And the federal government is protecting us from them. And therefore we should be so thankful, because they protect us, and the soldiers go out there and they protect us, and we're safe. And so that's our image of how great the federal government is, and how great the country is, and how effective it works, and how it's doing what it's supposed to do. And therefore we don't need national divorce because of that. But what we really should be looking at is, does the federal government provide for the safety and protection of your rights? Does the federal government make sure that people who need health care can have health care? Does the federal government make sure that the people who are workers can provide for their families? Does the federal government make sure that, we have an environment that is clean for us, the air of which we can breathe and the water we can drink? I mean, sure, there's the EPA out there. There are some federal government agencies out there that are working to that end. But we saw what happened in, for example, Flint, Michigan, with the water supply. We see what happens in California with the forest fires. I mean, this is the federal government. They're supposed to be taking care of our national forests. It's the federal government. They're supposed to make sure that we're not drinking polluted, dirty water. It's the federal government. They're supposed to make sure that we have people who are not dying because they don't have health insurance that they pay to some private corporation. The government fails when it comes to these issues and other issues.
Struck up 6 times in a month. I've spent $600. I'll probably the way things are going, fill my truck up 3 times and it'll be $600 soon. These are the same people that told you $3.5 trillion means nothing, but they're worried about you spending $600. If you can explain that to me, then you're smarter than I am.
Good point.
Now, you might think, oh, well, we'll just move to crypto. But invisible dollars is terrifying to them. So they're inventing more bureaucracy to weaponize. The Justice Department is now setting up a national cryptocurrency enforcement team. Ooh, we all know where this is going. They want to penalize any kind of anonymity. You will be forced to comply. Banking will not look the same in the years ahead. Probably as soon as next year, you'll be able to see it. Both the Treasury and the Fed are being weaponized to change the way we all bank forever. Biden's, and I'm not making this up, new Soviet-born, Soviet-trained honors student that got the scholarship,
I'm sorry. I knew there would be some connection to Russia, and it would be so dramatic. I knew it. I told you in the beginning, Glenn Beck is going to some way talk about Russia. Now probably China too. So let's see. Maybe, Soviet born, right? And maybe she's from China too or something like that. We'll see what else he's got to say.
Lenin scholarship in the former Soviet Union is the Treasury pick. And she wants to nationalize retail banking. So you'll go instead to the Fed for loans. The Fed, the government. Wow, you better behave. And can you imagine how many small and local banks will go bankrupt? Separating yourself from their messed up system will be impossible. Revolution is here. There's just no gunfire, and most people are burying their heads.
Well, it looks like Mr. Glenn's not actually talking so much about national divorce as I thought he would be. But hey, just to point it out there, my wife was born in 1989. That was the Soviet Union time period. And she is, I guess, like this woman he was speaking about, a Soviet woman, technically speaking. But she's certainly not some kind of revolutionary person. So this idea that, how many times did he say Soviet, 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 just to kind of really kind of push that into your mind there to, just because she was born in the Soviet Union, she has to be your enemy. She has to be up to no good. Now, this particular woman, I don't really know much about her. It was just the first time I've actually seen her picture. Maybe she is up to no good. Maybe everything Mr. Beck's saying here is accurate. But this idea that you're just going to take, just because the person was born in the Soviet Union means that they're up to no good and they must be out to destroy America is just a typical, Russophobia and so on and so forth. Let's see what else. I hope he gets into national divorce more. I don't talk about these side issues so much. What's he talking about here? Let's skip a little bit ahead. Oh, here we go. Let's see what he says.
Biden, that's almost the entire country here. There is no fringe right-wing joke about secession anymore. Even progressive media has been talking about it.
Yes,
have we really truly reached that point?
State secession, red state secession?
I think we have. Is there no righting this ship? Not unless we can come together on the Bill of Rights.
Which we can't.
The founders of this country designed our government to protect our rights. Is that what our government is currently doing? Are they protecting your right and the right of the person you really vehemently disagree with? Do we have equal rights?
It may look like I did, but I did not.
When they force an injection in your arm while sending federal cops to keep you from having an opinion over your child's education at a local school board meeting, when they're spying on what you spend your money on, are they protecting your rights? If the time comes, I think I would be more comfortable in 25 of the United States rather than the other 25 of the United Socialist States of America. But are even those 25 that I like or I think go our way, will they really? Is that really where we're at? Back in a minute.
He's going to be back in a minute. It's a good time for us to stop here. Is that where we're at? Okay. Well, to be honest, I mean, I know I kind of go off on my own little tangents a little bit, but we are now 14 minutes into his little movie here about national divorce and hasn't really spoken much about national divorce. Unfortunately, I thought that we were going to turn this video on. Like I said, I hadn't watched it in advance, just see that he's going to talk about the divided states of America, and he's going to talk about should we need to go through a national divorce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to watch it and hear his arguments, and I've heard them all before, so I'm going to respond to them once again. But it turns out where it looks like we're not going to do that. But, it seems like going forward, my prediction, because he just sort of alluded to it, is that he's going to talk about, well, we don't need to break up the union if we can manage to agree on the Bill of Rights. Well, it sounds pretty easy, but it's not. I mean, the Bill of Rights, let's talk about even the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, for example. We can't agree on the freedom of speech even in this country because we have people out there, for example, who want to outlaw, hate speech like they have in Canada. And again, whether or not you're going to argue in favor of that or not is a different discussion. The point is that there are people out there who have different opinions on to what extent we should regulate speech. Now, yes, speech should be regulated to some extent. I'm not someone who's going to say there should be no regulation on speech, and you can say whatever you want to say. But my position is closer to that than it is on stifling free speech outright. We need to have regulations on speech that are for the necessary protection of people and their safety. That's why we have laws out there that regulate speech based on protecting other people's safety, protecting the safety of communities from imminent danger or loss of life. That's why, for example, the most popular example of a limit on free speech is you not being able to scream that there's a fire in a theater because people are going to stand up and charge and get out that door as fast as possible, and you're going to get run over by somebody and you're going to get hurt, maybe killed. So that kind of limitations on free speech is justified when it's protecting someone from immediate danger or a group of people from immediate danger. We have limits on free speech that, protect you from having your name slandered. People spreading lies about you, that is a legitimate regulation of speech. However, even that's nuanced because if you're someone like a public figure and people are out there spreading rumors about you, which would, maybe fall under the definition of slander or libel, yet you're a public figure, you need to demonstrate that they're doing so with malice. So if you're just a regular old, everyday person out there who's not a public figure and someone's slandering your name, it's pretty easy to, pursue remedy to that. But if you're a public figure, like, for example, Joe Biden, for example, he can't go out there and say, hey, look at these people. They're saying things about me that are not true. And then take them to court and get some remedy for that. He'd have to show them, about journalists, for example. Journalists, for example, could write stories that are not true about public figures. And as long as the public figures can't demonstrate that it was done purposefully and with malice, then the journalist is free to write whatever they want to write. Now, there's a whole debate there that can go on for hours and days about whether or not that's a good idea. They have to weigh the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech versus the rights of the individual public figure. And so it's a long philosophical discussion that could be had. But the point is that, yes, there should be some limits on free speech, but it's a very abstract debate. And there are people on different ends of that debate. And so the idea that we're going to be able to somehow, as Glenn Beck says about, well, we can avoid a national breakup, we can avoid a national divorce if we could just agree on the Bill of Rights. Well, if we go to the first one, the First Amendment, the first part of the first one, freedom of speech, even on that particular sub-point, there's not going to be consensus anymore on what the freedom of speech means. And like Glenn Beck was saying, it seems like some parents in our society don't even have the freedom of speech to go out to a public school board meeting and express their views there. Their discontent with what the curriculum is at their school. So there's a wide spread of opinion when it comes to what freedom of speech is and what you should be free to say and what you should not be free to say. And there are people out there who want to significantly limit free speech. That's why, even though it may not be law right now, but, we have this cancel culture in society simply based upon the fact that because you said something or you wrote something 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, you may be a completely different person now, but yet you wrote it or said it 10 or 20 years ago. And so therefore, there's a segment of our society that thinks you should be punished for that now. Maybe you should lose your job because of it. I don't agree with that. I'm an opponent of cancel culture. I believe that people should be able to say what they say, write what they believe, if that's what they believe, and it's not done with malice. And in time, maybe they change their views. And maybe they adopt a different opinion at time. And therefore, they're a different person. Personally, I have experience with that. A decade ago, I made a pretty loud resignation as an activist working for the National Organization for Marriage. We toured around the country organizing rallies against the same-sex marriage. I drove the bus. I organized the tour. It was 17 states, 21 cities, 10,000 miles. We went from Maine to Minnesota to Georgia and Washington, D.C., a bunch of places in between. And I was, the organizer of the largest social media network against same-sex marriage in America. That was my opinion at the time. And then I met same-sex couples during this political tour on a bus. And I had a change of heart. So now I'm an advocate in support of marriage equality. Even though many of the things I might be talking about in this video and some of the previous videos represent the fact that I'm more conservative, politically speaking. I'm a registered Republican running for governor of California, yet I support marriage equality. So the point is that we can have, or we ought to have, the ability to have our own views and our own opinions. And with time, maybe people change their views and opinions. And it doesn't mean that we should go back and then punish them retroactively for something that they may have said 10 or 20 years ago. I just think that's ridiculous. And there are people out there who want to do that because they believe in a more robust regulation of speech and that people need to be held accountable for things that they say. And I fundamentally disagree with that. But yeah, I don't think that Mr. Glenn Beck here is talking so much about Calexit national divorce, but let's see what he's going to say next.
Whatever is coming, I will tell you, Bitcoin or Goldline. I just told you about Bitcoin. They're going to start regulating the snot out of it. Time magazine laid out the potential death of a dollar in a fascinating and terrifying piece. I think it was last week or the week before. China has already opened up a digital currency to foreigners, and next year when they host the Winter Games, they expect the whole visiting world to utilize it and test it. This is why that's important. If China becomes the reserve currency for enough countries, our dollar is worth almost nothing.
China,
because all of those dollars are not in the system. All of those dollars are sitting in sovereign banks right now instead of gold. The very nature of money could all but be dictated by those who lead the charge and how. They are leading the charge. We are not. please consider gold or silver from Goldline. It is right for my family. I don't know if it's right for yours.
What is
But
he?
this whole show tonight is about
paid
being
sponsor?
prepared, and you've got to start thinking differently.
For Goldline?
Goldline. They're offering an end of the month special from now until Friday. You'll
This is
receive one
sick.
free 1 ounce silver Goldline branded bar with every qualifying purchased order for one issue, slavery. The issues that we have between the left and the right.
How to get the best tool
Oh,
for
yeah,
creating
no,
stunning videos? Go to motionary.com.
It's all
and
about
get
the money,
best video
Mr. Beck.
templates to make that.
All about the money. First, he's talking about his paid
And
sponsorship
right
with
now,
Goldline.
you can't
And then
count
right
them,
after
and
that,
they are big
You got an
and deep.
advertisement.
What kept us
And yet he's
going
never
in
even spoken
every
anything
other
about really
war
national
was we
divorce,
came
and
around a
you're
set
now
of
into,
principles.
20 minutes into his video?
And I don't think we agree on those anymore. One of the voices who is really, really thought out and been asking some thoughtful questions is a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute. His name is Dave Raboy. He recently wrote a piece titled "National Divorce
Raboy,
is Expensive but
I
Worth
read
Every
this.
Penny." It's a must read.
And responded to
David,
it on
good
my
to have
blog
you.
at louismarinelli.com. Oh, here he is. Let's
I
hear it
am
from
going
the
through a really
source
tough
himself.
time right now because my job has been to warn. And I've been warning about this, and we've passed all the exits that I know of. And it feels impending now. Feels like it's here and about to get much worse very soon.
It's going to get much worse before it
do you
gets
agree
better.
with that?
And the only way it's going to get
I
better
think
is through
everyone
national
feels
divorce.
It's not an accident that a lot of people are talking about national divorce. They're talking about things in kind of apocalyptic terms because we're basically
Glenn
there
Beck.
in many ways. As you said, we no longer agree on the foundational things that make America America. We're now more than 100 years past into the progressive project to remake the country. And we're basically about 50-50. And the really important thing, I think, is the division on the basic things, as you said.
Yeah.
Like, what is our conception of justice? Is equality before the law desirable?
Right.
We say yes.
Yeah,
The
they
left
say
says
equity.
no.
They say
the left says
equity.
equity.
Right.
And then they say, well, no, we should base things on the basis of, someone's race or gender or 16 other different things. We should base justice on that. And I'm not sure how you can have a single society based on this. I mean, nobody's going to be happy. So, I mean, I'm not even at the point where I'm going to condemn the left.
Sure. We're just in.
Fine.
Well, he's out there saying that he, basically Glenn Beck started making a video saying, you know what? I need to talk about this topic of national divorce because everyone's talking about it. And by the way, I can really monetize it. So I'm going to, plug Goldline and I'm going to stick advertisements in the video too because everyone's talking about it. So I'll draw the clicks to my website and they'll hear what I got to say. I guess I fell for it. I fell for it, Mr. Beck. And so now we're here talking about Mr. Beck's words. And he spends the whole time in his supposed attack on national divorce, basically giving reasons for us to have a national divorce. And now he's bringing on this guest who also seems to be in support of, or at least laying out the foundation for an argument in support of national divorce. So I think it's a great video because this really demonstrates exactly why we need a national divorce. And it's not me telling you. It's not, my colleague Marcus Ruiz Evans telling you, or the other colleagues over at the Yes California Independence Campaign telling you about that. It's people who are supposedly against the idea, laying out the best arguments in support of it.
Yeah. So let me help me out on this. In one of your essays that I read recently, you said we got to stop wasting time and having conversations with people and going over the same arguments over and over again. Explain that.
Well, that's what we were talking about this whole time before he even answers. We're going to hear his answer in a second here, but we're not going to get that compromise. I've been talking about this for years. We're past the time of compromise, and for us to, take the higher ground and come sit at the table and work things out and end up with some kind of a compromise that allows us as a society to move forward in tranquility. We are far beyond that. Far beyond that. There will be no compromise because we're not going to compromise our values. And because the problem in our society is a difference in values, cultural differences, that's why we are not going to be able to have that tranquility and that agreement and that ability to compromise and have progress. So that's why we need a national divorce. So we can agree to disagree, split up the assets, share the debts, and peacefully part ways. Get out of each other's domestic affairs. So let's see what the guest has to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's a. It just. I mean, as you said, it just wastes time. You've got. I mean, especially we've been through what 4 or 5 years of the Trump era, and we have the never Trump people and the pro Trump people and the skeptical of Trump, but I'll give him a chance people, and he's out of office. We have to move on now, and having the same conversations with the same people. I'm thinking of some of the folks at some of these websites.
Well, actually, I would disagree with that. I don't think it's time for us to move on, and the reason is simple. I think that Donald Trump is going to campaign in support of the Republicans in 2022, and there's going to be a Republican takeover of the Congress in 2022, the midterms, in a big way, both the House and the Senate. He's then going to go around the following years after that, claiming that he's responsible for that Republican takeover of Congress. He's then going to run for president in 2024. He'll be up against Joe Biden, whose poll numbers right now are tanking like faster than the speed of gravity. And, well, I guess gravity doesn't have a speed, but you know what I mean. And if he gets replaced, which is possible by Kamala Harris, let's say, for example, he doesn't finish out his first term because his handlers ask him to resign after the midterm so that Kamala Harris will still have the ability to run for 2 terms after that, then Mr. Donald Trump will be up against Kamala Harris, who wasn't elected president and who hasn't been elected to national office and only has served as, the what do you call it? The Attorney General of California. I forget who she used to be. The Attorney General of California, for example, and a senator from California. So she hasn't got the resume for that. And aside from that, she is quite unpopular, as I understand, in the polls as well. So you're going to be a situation where Donald Trump is going to be up against either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, and things are not going pretty well right now. If you talk about Joe Biden's polls or about the situation going on in the country, things are not going so well. And then you're going to have a Republican takeover of Congress in 2022, and the Biden administration is going to be a lame duck administration from that day forward because they're going to get nothing through Congress without the approval of the House and the Senate, from the Republican House and the Senate. You know that the Republican House is going to initiate impeachment hearings for one reason or another, because as we know in our society, impeachment is now just, what the party and minority does to the power, with the power in the group in power, the party in power. That's just what happens. It's not something that's reserved for those rare cases when an elected official is guilty of some crime. High crimes and misdemeanors, like it used to be. Now it's a political tool. The Republicans started it in the 90s and they impeaching Bill Clinton. Then they tried to impeach George Bush. In response to that, there were efforts to impeach Barack Obama, or, criticize or take into consideration the fact that perhaps he wasn't born in the United States. Then, of course, Donald Trump, in response to that, was impeached twice. And on day one, when Joe Biden assumed the office of presidency, there was an attempt or there was a resolution to impeach Joe Biden in the House of Representatives on day one. And I'm not a fan of Joe Biden, but on day one, already trying to impeach him on day one. That's like Barack Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize in his first couple months as president. What did he do to earn the Nobel Peace Prize when other people out there suffering around the world for years or decades or longer in pursuit of peace were ignored for the virtual signaling of giving Barack Obama the award? Anyway, let's see what this guy has got to say.
Work, dispatch, etc. And they're really not talking to conservatives. They're no longer talking to Republican voters. They're talking to Democrats. So why even engage with them? It's a silly, it's a silly waste of time.
So how do I converse with people? I mean, my anxiety gets so high when I start talking to people, even in my own neighborhood. They're big business people. They run large corporations, or they have, made it a long time ago, whatever. And their mom's involved with their kids. And I talk to them and they all feel it, but they think that this kind of talk is over the top.
Crazy. Okay.
And it's the fight I've been having for 20 years now.
Right. Look, I mean, I think this is the downside of being ahead of the curve. It's the downside of being perceptive and to see what's coming. I mean, I would tell these people, I would say, look, if you have heterodox opinions at all, if you differ at all from the conventional wisdom of the left today on any issue, or tomorrow, or the next day because it changes, then you will have problems banking. You will have problems sending your kids to school. You will have problems, companies will not want to do business with you. You will find yourself.
People don't believe that.
Yeah.
They think that'll never happen. It's here. They're firing here. People now if you don't have the vaccine. Right. And it's not even a law.
Well, I think they're, continuing the argument in support of national divorce. That's basically what this is. And I think that they're really doing a good job highlighting the division in our society and the point that the divisions and the disagreements that we have are not trivial. And because they're not trivial, they are unsolvable. And because they're unsolvable, it's better for us to agree to disagree and peacefully part ways so that everyone can have a country that reflects the type of values that they have for themselves, or at least a larger number of people. Of course, we're not going to be able to create utopia through national divorce. But we can create more politically homogenous communities through national divorce. And those politically homogenous communities will be able to establish governments that represent those communities effectively, because those communities will elect their representatives, and therefore the government will be of and by and for the people that elected them. Them, of course, all being a politically homogenous community. So that means the government should therefore, logically speaking, also be relatively politically homogenous. And I'm not saying that, for example, that means that we're going to be able to have a national divorce in such a way where there's going to be one party rule in every new country that establishes itself out of national divorce. That's not good either. We need to have minority parties. We need to have opposition in government. It's absolutely necessary. So I'm not talking about creating a country of California where there's just, the Democratic Party, because we cut out all the Republicans and they go to Nevada or they go to Oregon. They establish the state of Jefferson. I'm not talking about creating a, conservative state in the central part of the country where there's just Republicans and there's no Democratic opposition, minority party. I am talking about a situation where we don't have such a large country that goes from, as we say, sea to shining sea, thousands of miles across different types of geography and topography, spanning cultures and communities that come from different backgrounds and have different histories and have different value systems. And that somehow all of that is supposed to work together and agree on what's best for everybody? How can we possibly agree on what's best for everybody when we have such a diverse country that everybody not only wants different things, but needs different things? And so by compromising, you're requiring people to be willing to give up things that they need, that perhaps other communities do not need. And so therefore they see it as unnecessary. So you're going to be constantly in a community, in a society, in a country where some communities are going to believe that things that you need for your survival and for your happiness are unnecessary. And we're going to have a continuation of a situation of a country where the other communities believe that what they need is unnecessary, or what they need is maybe tyrannical or racist or some other adjective that can be used to describe it. And they're fascist because of it. Or the left are communist because of that. It's just better to agree to disagree. Split up the assets. Share the debts. Peacefully part ways. And then we can have, on a country level, we can have the equivalent of you do you and I'll do me. California will do California and Texas will do Texas. And as a result of that, people of California and the people of Texas can get along. Because although we'll be looking across the screen there and seeing what the others are doing, it's no longer going to have a direct impact on our daily lives. So we don't have to have such a sense of urgency all the time to stand up and oppose it. Because as long as the people of Texas and the people of California live in the same country, each side is going to have and sense a feeling of urgency to stand up and oppose what the other side is doing. Because they don't want, in Texas, for Texas to become California. In fact, they got the t-shirts that say it, "Don't California my Texas." And certainly the people in California don't want a bunch of conservatives moving to California and changing the political landscape in California. The equivalent of "Don't Texas my California." Literally people wearing shirts like that. And so as long as we are in one society where we have such core differences of opinion on values, on the truth of science, on what the freedom of speech is and what our basic constitutional rights protect and what they don't protect, there's never going to be the opportunity for us to get along as a society. And there's always going to be a need, and a growing need, for there to be a national divorce. That's what we need to accept. That's what we need to accept. We don't need to accept some idea that, as Glenn Beck was talking, that all we need to do is somehow agree to adopt and implement the law or the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights. We need to accept that things are getting worse. They're going to continue getting worse, and they're not going to get better as long as we live in the same country where everybody has to be in a constant state of alert to protect their basic fundamental rights from the other communities in our country. If the people of Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma and the other red states have their way, within a year, a woman will not have the right to choose to terminate a pregnancy as a constitutional right in this country. And so in that situation, people in California are going to be in a constant state of urgency to protect that right. And if the people of California have their way, along with the other Democrats in this country, the tax rates are going to be higher, and medicine is going to be socialized, etc. And the people of Texas and the red states are going to constantly be in a constant state of urgency to stop that and prevent that growth of what they call socialism. Shouldn't have to live like that. Now, I think that we've gotten the point of where Glenn Beck is going, so I'm not going to go back to that. I think that we understand where he's going, what he's been talking about. I don't think it's necessary to listen anymore. Because what I am convinced of is the fact that he doesn't have an argument like any of the others. That the country should remain united because it, as a united country, is working just fine. He doesn't have an argument that the federal government is functioning well, that our democracy is functioning well, that our people have faith in our elected officials, that people have faith in our government institutions, that people have faith in the elections. Some people believe that the current president of the United States is not a legitimate president. They may be right. They may be wrong. The fact that they exist and that we had an election less than a year ago and a sizable portion of the population doesn't accept its results, how does that possibly allow you to believe that this is still a society that can come together and solve its problems? That just demonstrates how divided the country is to the point of no return. And so this idea that these people like Glenn Beck, we're just going to somehow be able to, agree on the Declaration of Independence or agree on the Bill of Rights, as he said. And some of the other writers are saying we should just find other like-minded people in the country and stand together and affect the change that we want to see in the world, like Gandhi said. We're living in a different time period. In our society, we have not the ingredients, let's say, for there to be rational discussion in society, to come to the table and have a civil conversation about the problems and come to a rational and fair solution. Now, that couldn't be said about the other generations in our society. Perhaps it could be said that, previous generations were more civil with one another, and they could iron out some significant problems in society. But that's not this generation. Those are not these problems in our society. And there is going to be a continuing division between the different sections of our society, political sections in our society, as long as we remain as one country. And as long as one state can impact the domestic affairs of another state. Because even if we're talking about things like the election of a senator, you think that you're electing a senator in California, you have 2 senators in California, it should be the business of the people of California. But it's not. Because one of those 2 senators could, have a filibuster and hold up legislation from passing in the Senate for everybody. For everybody. And so naturally, the election of a senator in one state is a national issue. And by the way, if we want to talk about California having 2 senators for 40 million people, and Wyoming having 2 senators for 700,000 people, we can get into a whole new conversation about how the system itself is designed in a way that is inadequate for today's population and inadequate for the distribution of today's population in the United States. Because that system of 2 senators per state was designed way back when there were just a handful of states on the eastern seaboard. And the difference in population between them, I believe, was 1 to 13. Meaning that there were 13 more people in the most populous state than there was in the least populous state at the time. Now that's a gap, but it's not an enormous gap. Today, that difference, I think, is 1 to 60. Whereas there are 60 more Californians than there are people in Wyoming. And so that is a situation where the system itself is no longer functioning as it should. Like Mr. Jason here, Jason Wright says, no taxation without adequate representation is exactly right. Because California as a state, and this is now kind of pivoting towards Calexit, where we're just talking about California and not so much about national divorce on the national level, but California itself. One of the prime reasons why California should secede from the Union through Calexit is the fact that we have inadequate representation in Washington, both in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate. Now, of course, you can say, well, the United States Senate, you can't have inadequate representation because both senators from every state are equal. And then each state has 2 senators, so there's equality. That's fine. But should there be equality in the Senate between the states? Is that system adequate for today when we have 40 million people in California? And they're living within an arbitrarily set borders. And because of the fact that they live within those arbitrarily drawn borders, they get 2 senators, whereas another group of people get the same number of representatives in the Senate because they live in a different set of boundaries. I don't agree with that. So Jason Wright is exactly right that there is a problem with California being a member of the Union because we do not have adequate representation in Washington. So there are many people in California who support Calexit. I, of course, am running for governor on that platform on achieving Calexit through national divorce, because there are many things that California can benefit from through independence. And I'll be writing a book, and actually I'm writing the book now. It'll be finished within the next couple of weeks or months. Definitely in time for the upcoming governor race in 2022, where I'll be outlining the arguments in support of Calexit and why California needs to secede, what California as an independent country will look like, what it will do as an independent country, how we can affect the world and change the world for the better. If there's any population in the United States that's full of people that want to change the world, it's California. Rightly or wrongly. There are many things that Californians believe that I don't believe. But we don't have to all be twins and clones of each other. There can be differences of opinion, and that's good. But the point of the matter is that California is full of people that want to change the world. And yet, if we remain a state in the country, we're limiting our ability to do that. California is an independent country, the 5th largest economy in the world, can do so much to affect change in the world. When we don't have to bend the knee to Washington, and we have our own voice on the world stage, we can use our clout, our economic power, to affect change in the world. That's a good thing. Positive change in the world. Because California is an independent country. It's not going to just be a copy of the United States. Just following the United States everywhere it goes like some lapdog. No, we're going to be an independent country. We're going to have the ability to express our values on the world stage and promote those values around the world and insist that people respect the rights of others around the world. And so I'm looking forward to publishing this book in the coming weeks, perhaps in the coming months. It'll be the 3rd version of the book because we already have the first 2 published. And so in that context, this is an update with new data from the last several years. And I will encourage people to, in the near future, visit our website where you will be able to download that book, which actually doubles as the platform for my campaign for governor. And now I'm looking forward to returning to California and running for governor to give the Californians a real choice. Because we need to stop having an election between two political parties. Because first of all, in California, it's pointless. The Republican Party is the only party that has a chance at winning a statewide election, and they don't win statewide elections. And so that means the only party that's going to win a statewide election is the Democratic Party. It's one-party rule. But that's because the people of California have to choose between a Democrat and a Republican in the elections. What my candidacy represents is an opportunity not to give the people of California the chance to vote between two political parties, just between two individuals, a Democrat and a Republican, or two political parties, the Democratic and Republican parties, as they get every 4 years. But the opportunity to vote for two different futures. If you want California to remain a state, if you want to protect the status union, if you want nothing to change, you can vote for Gavin Newsom. He is Mr. Status Quo. And California will remain a state because he will protect California being a state, because his ambition, the thing that he really cares about, is not California. Gavin Newsom doesn't care about California. Gavin Newsom cares about Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom wants to be president of the United States and is using California as a stepping stone to the White House. He doesn't care about California. He's going to go out there, of course, and act like he cares about California. And during times where he's sweating it because the recall numbers are not going so well in the polls, he's going to go into those bridges and clean up some garbage. Talk about trying to help the homeless. But where is he now? Is he out there cleaning up the garbage? Talking about homelessness? It's because Gavin Newsom talks about what Gavin Newsom needs to talk about in order for him to advance his own personal and political agenda to eventually become president of the United States. And because Gavin Newsom wants to be president of the United States, of course he's going to be opposed to national divorce. Of course he's going to be opposed to Calexit. But that's exactly what Californians need. Because through Calexit and national divorce, California can be all that it can be. I don't want to be president of the United States. In fact, I'm not even a big fan of politics. But I see what needs to be done. And I'm willing to stand up and take an unpopular position and say what I feel needs to be done. Like they said in Glenn Beck, they were talking about people that are ahead of the curve. Now, I'm not saying I'm necessarily ahead of the curve in some way, but certainly have a vision for a different future for California. And that vision entails California being an independent country, not having to bend the knee to Washington. An independent country that can stand up for our California values around the world. An independent country that doesn't have to subsidize the other states in this country, the populations of which hate Californians. They take our food and dairy products. We literally feed them and they bite the hand that feeds them. These other states in the union. The ones that we subsidize. The ones that we subsidize and then have to raise taxes on our own people in order to make up the difference in the lost revenue. That's why, in part, California's taxes are so high. Because not only are we paying for California, not only are we taking care of California, we're also taking care of some of the other states in this country. Think about that. A lot of people have a problem with California taxes. Where those taxes go? Why do we have such high taxes in California? It's some of the worst roads, worst schools, worst hospitals, worst infrastructure, forest fires, droughts. Why do we have these problems at the same time that we have the highest taxes in the nation? It's just not because money doesn't buy everything. We have the highest taxes in the nation simply because we're making up for revenue lost to the other states. We pay federal taxes every year to the federal government. And then they redistribute a portion of those taxes to the other states. That means we don't get that money back in the form of investment in California. Well, we need to raise the money somehow, so we raise the taxes on our own people. We take out bonds on the future. So we're paying interest all the time. Borrowing money. It's bad fiscal policy, but it's necessary bad fiscal policy because we're losing our taxes through the redistribution of our taxes by the federal government to the other states in this union. You've heard it before. California is a donor state. If we keep California's taxes in California, instead of letting it go to the IRS and the IRS distribute to the other states in this country, we can keep California's taxes in California and take care of the people of California first. We can actually reduce our taxes while we pay down our debts and fully fund our infrastructure programs, our education programs, and develop and expand our education programs and develop and expand our healthcare programs without raising taxes, but reducing taxes. These are some of the things that are possible through California independence. Now, people out there say, oh, it's, you can't secede from the union because the Constitution says you can't do it. Well, where in the Constitution does it say a state can't secede? It doesn't say that. There's the answer. The Constitution is silent on the issue of secession. It doesn't say anywhere that a state can or cannot secede from the union. The only thing we have to rely on is Texas versus White, and many people wrongfully believe that Texas versus White says that a state cannot secede from the union. That's not true. If you read the entire text, the basic summary is that a state cannot secede from the union unilaterally. Unilaterally. Texas, for example, could not secede from the union because Texas said so and the other states did not concur. That, I would concede, would be unconstitutional according to Texas versus White. But I'd also point out that that ruling comes from 1869 and may be up for renewal, for reconsideration. Just like Texas is now challenging Roe versus Wade, which would happen, in the 60s, 70s? And now it's up for reconsideration. That was only a couple of decades ago. The last time the Supreme Court talked about secession was a couple of years after the Civil War. And so inevitably, a new case that goes before the Supreme Court with new justices in a new century is going to come up with some potentially different result. And that perhaps maybe a state does have the right to secede unilaterally. But that's for the Supreme Court to decide. The point of the matter is that Texas versus White does not say a state can secede from the union. And it does say that a state can't secede from the union unilaterally. We got Bobby here telling me 1973. I imagine that's Roe versus Wade, 1973. Thank you, Bobby, for that clarification. And so if a state can't secede from the union unilaterally, what it can do is secede from the union with consent of the states. Now, what does consent of the states mean? That's a good question because that's also an issue that's not been settled. Some people say, consent of the states means you have to have a constitutional amendment. But where does it say that that's the threshold for consent of the states? The Supreme Court didn't say that you can secede from the union with a constitutional amendment. They said with the consent of the states. That's what they said. The Supreme Court ruled in Texas versus White that a state can secede from the union if they have the consent of the states. The question is, what is that threshold? Now, I would contend that California was made or admitted into the union with a simple majority vote. There was literally a vote on a piece of legislation that made California a state in the union by a majority vote. What happens if that law were repealed by a majority vote? There's no requirement that a law that's passed by majority vote is repealed by supermajority. So what would literally happen if Congress were to take that piece of legislation that was passed in 1850, passed by Congress in 1850 by majority vote, and simply repeal that law, repeal that act? Perhaps it would undo California's admission into the union by majority vote. Would that be consent? I'm not saying it would be. I'm saying it's an option. Because we haven't, as a country, and the Supreme Court hasn't, as an institution, established what is the consent of the states. Although in 1869, they established that consent of the state is necessary for a state to secede from the Union. So if they established in 1869 that a state may secede from the Union with the consent of the other states, I think it's at least worth exploring what does consent mean? What constitutes that consent? Maybe it's a majority vote of Congress. But I would take a different position. The consent of the states. Take a literal interpretation of what the justices said. They said consent of the states. They did not say the consent of Congress. They did not say through constitutional amendment. So I would take the position that consent of the states means that if half of the states and their state legislatures passed a resolution saying that California can secede from the Union if it wants, then that would give California the consent it needs. If there were 26 states that through their state legislatures passed a resolution that said California can secede from the Union if it wants, I would say that California has the consent of the states. And that I would take that consent of the states and use that as justification to move California to the next step to secede from the Union, which is to hold a referendum. Because if we have 26 states or 27 states in the Union that say California can secede from the Union if it wants, and I think we can do that, then it's up to the people of California to decide if that's what they want to do, once and for all. Put it before the people. Let the people vote. Democracy. And then if we have those two components, where 25, 26 states in the Union say California can secede from the Union if it wants by passing a resolution in their state legislature, and then the people of California at the ballot box vote in support of independence through an independence referendum, we have two necessary components for independence that would be recognized around the world as legitimate. That's one potential path towards independence, a constitutional, a peaceful, and legal path towards independence for California. Now, we need to have a governor who is open to that idea. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm that governor, because I'm not just open to that idea, I'm openly pursuing that idea. And I see that as a difference. But Gavin Newsom is openly opposed to the idea. And that's a problem. That's a problem for the people of California because, like I spoke about earlier, Donald Trump is going to run for president in 2024. There's going to be a Republican Congress. There's going to be a Republican Senate. He's going to be up against an elderly Joe Biden with potentially dismal polling, or against Kamala Harris, who's not going to be doing much better. In short, Donald Trump is going to have a fair chance at getting reelected president of the United States in 2024. He will then have the ability to run for 2 terms because it wouldn't have been consecutive with his first term. What are the people of California going to do in 2025 if Donald Trump takes the oath of office as president again? And you have a governor who wants to be president himself. And he's going to say, well, you know what, California, we need to stick it out. We need to stand up against Donald Trump. We need to sue him in court. Do everything we did last time. Because he has his own personal ambition to be president. And so he's not willing to explore the option of Calexit. We need to have a governor in office in Sacramento who is open to the idea of California independence in 2024. So when that happens, and that when Donald Trump is reelected president, we have a governor in place who's ready to do what is necessary to protect the people of California from that president. And you're not going to have that with Gavin Newsom. And you're not going to have it with any other Democratic candidates who challenge him in the primary. And you're not going to have that with any of the other Republican candidates that challenge him in the primary, because nobody is willing to stand up and say what needs to be said. No one's willing to stand up and take an unpopular position because the big, bad secessionist was running for governor as a secessionist in support of national divorce. Now, I'm willing to go out and do that. That's why I'm doing it. Because I believe it's something that needs to be done. And I believe that people of California deserve to at least have that choice on the ballot. Where they can vote for Gavin Newsom if they want. They can vote for Kevin Faulconer if they want an establishment Republican to run. But for those of you out there, millions of Californians out there who are open to the idea and would love to see an independent California, at least this time in 2022, you will have the option to vote for a candidate who supports Calexit. And win or lose, at least the option was there on the ballot for the first time in history for the people of California, the millions of Californians who, although they may not believe it's possible, would certainly love to see it happen. They will have a candidate to vote for because they will know that the candidate running for California independence, running for governor on a platform of California independence, is an activist specifically on that topic. The president of Calexit, one of the founders of the campaign. And I think that is crucial. And I think that the people of California will appreciate to have that option on the ballot for the first time. And that's why I run for governor. So anyway, this is my new channel, California Secessionist. My name is Louis Marinelli. I'm running for governor, as I've stated. I will be challenging Gavin Newsom. This election coming up, if I am up against him one-on-one in November of 2022, will not be election between two people or two political parties vying for power in Sacramento. It will be between two different futures. It will be a vote between statehood and nationhood. Do you want California to remain a state in the union and protect the status quo and have our problems in California continue to remain as they are, or at worst get even worse? Then you're going to vote for Gavin Newsom and the continuation of one-party rule by the Democratic Party, which has been the source of California's problem for decades. Just keep doing the same thing, California. We have so many problems in California, and the Democratic Party has been in control of the legislature and the governor's office for decades in supermajority amounts, where they can do whatever they want to do. They can pass whatever legislation they want to do. And so this is Louis Marinelli. I'm running for governor on that platform. And I've forgotten to put my little banner up here for you to see that we are going on the campaign for California independence. And I wish you all have a nice afternoon.